guys, and welcome to the Movie-Club Emporium. And this is our live stream for February. And I know, but it's a short month and it's a weird month, so it's for February. Welcome to our best and worst of 2024. It kind of works out because we like to take the month of January and get caught up on movies. When everybody else online is doing their best and worst of the year. Well, we don't have a lot of time to watch movies. We both have full time jobs and we need a little extra time, so we take that extra month because we want to give you the definitive best and worst of list. And what better night to do that than the night before the Academy Awards, where movies themselves tell you what movies are the best. Um, so I guess in that spirit, we're right up there with the Razzies because I think they happen tonight. So yay. But we are excited to talk about this. Is kind of low key my favorite live that we do every year because it's just so full of surprises because neither of us know what's on each other's lists. And it's just a fun time. And so, but we always have fun here, no matter what. So you can join us here uh, on our Twitch every month, twitch.tv/, Movie Club Emporium. Uh, and if you're like, hey, this is kind of fun, I wonder what they do on a weekly basis. You can check that out over on our YouTube channel. Just search up the Movie Club Emporium. Each week, new reviews go up. Last week, I talked about The Monkey. Um, this week, I'm doing something a little different because it is the Oscars. This live, which I'm usually like a month or two behind when I post the replay on YouTube, but for once, this live will be up on YouTube tomorrow. It'll go up in the spot of a normal review so that everybody can watch it instead of the Oscars, because surely this is not going to be a 4 hour ordeal like the Academy Awards will be. Although it will probably be a lot funner, a lot more fun, but we'll have less Conan O'Brien, unless he finally answers my phone calls. But other than that, how are you, sir?
All right. Had work today. It was kind of a long, slow day at work, but not too bad otherwise. Unfortunately, during our last live stream, it was the beginning of a sickness that would knock me out for 2 weeks straight. So I was super ill with the flu, and it took me about 3 weeks to totally recover. So that's what I've been doing since our last live, mainly just working and recovering. So, but I'm doing better, feeling much better. I'm happy to be back among the living.
Nice, nice. Um, well, that leads to a terrible segue that I didn't have planned. Uh, but so a lot has happened in these last few weeks. Movie wise, we lost a lot of big names. I think for Nick and I in particular, the passing of Peter Jason, the John Carpenter like staple. There was news about Reggie Bannister from the Phantasm franchise. Uh, Probably the only hero you'll ever know to just rock a skullet for 40 plus years. And then, of course, today, David Johansen passed away from
It's
Scrooged and, uh, of course, his music career. He's the best segment in the Tales from the Dark Side movie. Um, he was the low key best part of. I like there needs to be a best part. There's a low bar for. He's the villain in Mr. Nanny, who has like a chrome skull. And I only bring that up because Amber and I years ago did a podcast episode where we watched Mr. Nanny. I don't recommend that. And then of course the big one is Gene Hackman. Now, just we'll go ahead and let you know. Next month for March, our live, we had planned and we're going to do a David Lynch tribute, much like we did with Roger Corman. David Lynch was a very big part of, you know, of our movie going Future, at least for sure for me, he's one of my favorites. And I thought about maybe we could, do one for Hackman, but I was like, things are still kind of murky with everything. I don't want to kind of piggyback off what's in the news. And then honestly, like, we're gonna be talking about him because coming up this summer we're doing the Superman movies. We're gonna do westerns at some point, so we're gonna be talking about my favorite Gene Hackman movie in there. We talked about doing Wes Anderson movies, so like there's a lot of episodes where we'll talk about Gene Hackman. Um, but I wanted to give you two quick segments, and then I'll let Nick talk if he'd like to. Two things to watch if you want to like a deep dive into Hackman, because everybody's going to talk about French Connection, the Conversation, I saw people talking about Young Frankenstein because he has that quick scene in that movie. It's really funny. Hoosiers we talked about. Um, but the two I bring up, one I saw it on Twitter and I hadn't thought about it forever, is there's a scene he has in the birdcage, and it's like a 3 minute speech where he is just talking very slowly, and every time you think he's done, he keeps talking about driving from the north down to Miami so they could watch the leaves change. And it's just the driest, funniest you'll ever see Gene Hackman because he's just like, we drove down to watch the leaves change. Connecticut, Virginia, Kentucky. It's so weird driving from where it's cold down here to where it's warm. Ohio has nice foliage. A lot of good mountains, purple mountains. Like he just goes on like that for 3 minutes. It's so funny. But then a movie I wanted to talk about, and one some people aren't going to talk about, unless they're big movie nerds. I saw it not too long ago. I don't know if it's streaming anymore, so hope you can find it. Prime Cut. It's a 1972 movie with Gene Hackman and Lee Marvin. So like just two men being men. And it's directed by the guy who directed Fletch and Fletch Lives, and who also directed The Golden Child. And it's like Lee Marvin is a mob enforcer who has to go down to this small Kansas town that Gene Hackman runs because he like runs the local like slaughterhouse, but he also kind of kingpins this small town. And when a mob enforcer goes down there to collect money, Gene Hackman's men sends him back to the Chicago mob as sausage. And so it's just Lee Marvin manlying up against a manly Gene Hackman, and it's kind of low key awesome.
It's a legendarily manly movie. And that's one of his lesser known movies that I hear recommended a lot. And yeah, I've yet to check it out, but it's supposed to be just brutal and gritty and gnarly, and I'm so down.
But we're here to celebrate and really give it to some of the best and worst movies of the year. So, since we'll want to end this thing on a positive note, we'll start with uh, our our 10 worst. Um, First of all, do you have any? I've got a few, but I'll ask you. Do you have any dishonorable mentions? And we'll jump into this thing so we don't go as long as the Oscars do.
Well, so I'm gonna list off. There's three movies, none of which I didn't like, but it's not necessarily I really hated. It's just they didn't do it for me. Two of them are actually you can kind of lump together. Um, Kung Fu Panda 4 and Despicable Me 4. Yes, they're children's movies, but I still love watching kids' movies because at this point I'm invested in a lot of those series. But they're the fourth movie in an animated series, and you can really tell, especially with Kung Fu Panda, they're phoning it in, which is a shame because I think the first three movies are actually really good. And it kind of felt soulless. They weren't the worst movies, but you could definitely tell the decline in quality. And my third on dishonorable mention is a movie that's it's not bad. It's just very scattered. I don't think it was well paced, and I don't know. It just didn't come together. It was The Order had Nicholas Holt and Jude Law in it. Good acting, beautifully shot. It's about a white supremacist group in North Idaho back in the 80s. It just doesn't really ever get moving well, and it's just it tries to follow around these two characters equally, and it really should have focused on one. Not bad, but could have been better given the source material.
I have not. I saw it. I remember seeing like the trailer for it and it looked good. I did never watch it, and I have not. I have not seen. I didn't see. I think I saw the first two Despicable Me's, and I only saw the first Kung Fu Panda. So I was out of the game for those. So like much like you, my dishonorable mentions for the most part are movies that like I'm not. Most of them I wasn't mad at the movie themselves. I was mad at either what kind of like where we're at in those particular genres with these movies, or just kind of where we are with franchises in general, or the people who made them. So two of them I lumped together because they're kind of tied is Night Swim and Tarot. Both are terrible, terrible, terrible PG-13 horror movies. Night Swim is about a haunted pool that's less scary than that Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. Um,
Oh, well, I don't know. That episode is pretty scary, so.
and then Tarot is essentially like the movie, like movies like Wish Upon, which are so bad they're good. Like that movie's funny. It's so funny because it's so terrible and stupid. But Tarot was just like if you've seen any movie of like Truth or Dare, Wish Upon, Fantasy Island movie they did a few years ago, which is one of the last movies I saw in the theater before COVID. Um, any of those like Blumhouse movies where you're just like, okay, I get it. Like, don't play with things you don't know about. It's that only more boring. Uh, one of them, I didn't. I will tell you this now. I did not finish, so it barely makes the list because of that. It's Rebel Moon Part Two. Look, I like Zack Snyder. I'm not a Zack Snyder internet fan. Like I think his version of Justice League is better. I love Watchmen. I love Dawn of the Dead. 300 is great. Like I even liked Sucker Punch when I saw it. I only saw it the one time. But the first Rebel Moon, I was like, okay, like I don't know Netflix. I don't know what we're doing. And then that second one, I was just like, no, stop it. Like maybe we don't. Maybe he needs to do like I just need that man to make a small film. Like just make
Yeah.
one small movie. Show me you can make a small movie, and then we'll go back. Um, the other two, one is kind of controversial to make this list because the movie wasn't bad. Um, it just didn't do well. It was so it's Horizon Chapter One. It's a super long, super like if you've seen a Kevin Costner western, you know what Horizon is, and the fact that he like left this TV show that kind of revitalized his career at the height of his power to be like, no, I'm gonna make like a 6-part western in the 2020s, and everybody went, no.
I, Kevin Costner's massive ego strikes again. Um, I hope he was making it just for himself because there was no way this was ever going to be successful and wasn't going to be poorly paced. I mean, I remember watching his Wyatt Earp movie back in the 90s, which is absolute just terrible compared to Tombstone. Poorly paced and but Kevin Costner's got to be in movies where he's basically the messiah and the chosen one for everything. So he did that again and tanked it probably one of the most successful things he'll ever be in as a result.
Yeah, and then the last one, and this might be a hot take. I don't know because it is is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I liked Afterlife a lot, and I defended Afterlife. That ending with, we'll get into later on with what one podcast I listen to, and everything they talk about. They call it Tarkin Town when we just start bringing dead people back to life and with CG. I think it worked for that movie. I thought it was a nice kind of reset for Ghostbusters. Frozen Empire, man, like it was just a movie. It was a if you watch Ghostbusters 2, which I love Ghostbusters 2, but you can kind of tell like Bill Murray kind of doesn't want to be there. I felt like Frozen Empire nobody wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and like, there's a whole swaths of that movie where like characters just disappear, and I was just like, okay, maybe there's talk about there be doing going back to like a cartoon on a streamer. Let's do that. Let's maybe we just stick to the three Ghostbuster movies that are good, and let's be done with it. Like Ghost, if we're gonna make Ghostbusters for kids, let's make it a cartoon. I'm kind of over the Ghostbusters.
Yeah. I think we are, getting one good movie that much later was great, but it was pretty unlikely number four was really going to capture lightning in a bottle again.
Yeah. So those are the honorable mentions or dishonorable mentions, I should say. Um, did you want to start these? One of us will start this one, and one of us will start best of. Do you have a preference?
Oh, I will launch off with dishonorable mention, or not
Okay.
dishonorable. First of, now keep in mind this is worst of in my opinion. These were just movies I didn't particularly care for. Some weren't necessarily terrible. I just felt underwhelmed by them. These are not what I believe are objectively the best movies of the year. Just ones that didn't hit with me. And right out the gate, number 10 was a movie I was really looking forward to, but after I was exiting the theater and I'm just kind of like, not, it's like not that great. It seemed to fall short of its potential. And it's Late Night with the Devil. I thought there was a lot of possibility there. I like the idea of there being this taping of this talk show where they communed with Satan and things went haywire. And it had some things stylistically that worked. It just, I didn't feel it all came together. It had some really some of the CGI and graphics were not good, and there were some really underwhelming performances. I it's one I didn't hate it. I just thought it fell so short of what it could have been.
Sorry, I was reading some of the comments. Somebody said Ghostbusters Afterlife. Oh yeah, Afterlife was goaded. So I did like Late Night with the Devil. I did not. It didn't come to the theater here, so I watched it when it hit Shutter. Which is very to me. It feels like the appropriate place to have watched it. It feels like a Shutter movie because, like you said, the it has a great concept. I like the idea of like introducing well, what's like this conspiracy theory, like the Grove or whatever, where like all the politicians go to like maintain their power, like in the woods of Colorado or whatever. Can't remember what it's called, or maybe it's Southern California. Like there's where like they wear Bohemian
Yeah,
Grove.
Bohemian Grove. Yeah,
Yeah, I liked the idea of it. Just like you said, toward the end where you start getting to some of the CG, you can feel like how low budget it actually is. And then yeah, it kind of starts to fall apart. I think I liked it more because this is kind of what I wanted that WNUF Halloween special to be. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it plays out like a 1980s like local live. Oh, the news anchor is going to go visit a haunted house. So it's kind of like the setup to that Tales from the Crypt episode with Morton
yes.
Downey Jr. Only that's actually really good, and WNUF I feel gets so bogged down in feeling like the 1980s. Like there's so many commercial cuts to like fake '80s commercial, local commercials that kind of takes you out of the movie. So I kind of this is what I wanted that to be, and so I think I enjoyed it more because of that. Because like, okay, this is what I want to get. It's a like a Johnny Carson show, and we're gonna have live exorcism, and things go nuts. But I do see what you're saying. That the some of the acting does feel very, I want to say almost VHS quality of acting. Like it feels like a longer VHS segment. Um, but I think maybe having not seen the theaters and kind of seen it on Shutter, I kind of felt like this is a better than what I would have expected from a Shutter original than if I had seen
Yeah.
it in the theater.
It's not one I would try to shoo anybody away from. I would just say go in with very reasonable expectations.
Mhm.
Um, and I felt he did, and it still fell. I think it still fell short. Went to see with two other guys, and they more or less felt the same way. As it's okay in some ways, but that's my number 10.
So my number 10 is actually maybe maybe my hottest take. Because all in all, like across the board, this is considered like a good movie. And kind of by all accounts, it is, but it's Speak No Evil. Um, James McAvoy is great in it. He does run a little bit of the Jack Nicholson and The Shining problem, where like he's at a 10 the whole movie, so he has nowhere to go. Um, but man, it's just, and I get it's super snobby to be like, but the original version, and it's not because it's a remake, but it's just like that movie's 2 years old, and the only reason you remade it was because Americans don't like to read movies. Um, and then the fact that they give it like a Hollywood happy ending, and that is one of the darkest endings of a movie I have ever seen in my entire life. And so where you kind of like pulled the teeth out of it was just like, ugh, like just felt like a total letdown if you knew that original film, or because like I said, it's widely available. It was on streaming. It was, I think, it even played in some theaters here. So it's not like it wasn't available, and it's not like it's an old movie that they remade an American. It's not like The Ring to the Gore Verbinski's The Ring. It's like that movie was like it was a year and a half old when they announced that they were making it, and it's just like, why? Like it would be like Parasite wins Best Picture, and then coming next year is the American remake of Parasite. Like it didn't make sense, and they defanged the movie, and it just really just kind of like, this is where we are. Like we can't be bothered to watch a foreign film, so we gotta make a dumber version of it.
It, uh, there's some American remakes I enjoy, but defanging it or taking the teeth out of it was it's pretty accurate because they have a tendency to do that, and they rarely make anything remotely close to the original. So I've not seen either one. I was actually planning to go see the new one in theaters, but what you're talking about is a sentiment echoed widely online. That maybe it's not the worst, but the original is just vastly superior.
And if you haven't seen the original, if you went in not knowing this was an American remake of a movie, aside from the fact that the biggest twist of the movie is given away in like that first teaser trailer, it's not a
Yeah.
bad little movie. It was just like kind of like, why are we here? Especially again with the trailer giving away the big twist of the movie is just like, then why are we even? Why am I even here?
Well, moving on to my number 9. It's gonna be another hot take because it's a movie that I liked more. I liked more when I first watched it than when I kept on thinking about it. It's another one. There's parts of this movie I really like, but overall, I think it just doesn't come together. And man, I really wanted it to. It's Alien Romulus. I love the Alien movies. I do. and I love the idea of kind of getting back to its roots. And in some ways, it felt like that, but it kind of felt like a bit of a greatest hits. And they felt like they were trying really hard to turn the main character into Ripley. Um, it has some awesome visuals. There's some genuine tension. There's some really great xenomorph moments. And then there's moments that are just so goofy and silly and take you out of the movie that it really bothered me. I think the movie also goes about 30 minutes too long. I don't think it has much in the way of. I think the only interesting character is the main cyborg, and everyone else is just completely forgettable. It just kind of made me wish I would just watch a real Alien and Aliens, because it was okay. I think it was okay at best, even though it has segments I really liked and some neat concepts in there. One thing that really turned me off was the CGI Ian Holm. I don't, I especially am having a role that's not like a brief that just shows up briefly. I can handle that. But he has a speaking role in the movie, and it just completely takes me out of it. Plus, I think that's the equivalent of like in the Old West, they would take famous gunslingers who have been killed and take them around and charge a mission to see their body. That's kind of what this feels like. This is just one of the more egregious examples of that. And that's probably the thing that really kicked it onto my list. Um, you get some xenomorph carnage, but in between, you get some uneven pacing and completely forgettable characters. But it was a tough one because there are truly parts I did enjoy. But there were some alien, even xenomorph scenes that yeah, I was like, okay, that's too much, and it's too incredibly unbelievable. So, yeah,
So it did make my list. I almost had it on my honorable mentions. I did like it. I'm a sucker for the alien movies, even the worst of them. I love. Like I'm the one guy, even more so than the filmmaker, who's just like, you know what, Alien 3 gets a bad rap. um the Ian Holmes stuff, like that, I can't defend. Like, especially in a world where like you want a classic robot from that series and Lance Hendrickson's still alive, you get Lance Hendrickson. Hell, even if you would have been like, if you'd have put like a weird like makeup on Fassbender, I'd have been like, okay, that's a choice, but all right. But to pick the
sure,
one dead actor, um, and yeah, for it to be in the movie so much, I will say on the home,
yeah,
it looks better on home video because they take off as some of the CGI and it's more of just the puppet, so it looks a little better. But still, you can't defend that. But as somebody who loves this franchise, um, I did. I did like the not everything. Like the come get away from her, you bitch. That's stupid. I guffawed in the theater when it happened. Um, but like I love Fede Alvarez's use of the stuff about Alien that kind of gets by the wayside. Like the I like the use the over maybe the overuse, but I like the face hugger stuff because you don't get a lot of them and they are creepy creatures. Um, I liked some of the tech. I liked the zero gravity thing. I thought was fun, a new way to deal with the acid blood. And I like that of all the movies, especially the ones that are supposed to tie Alien to Prometheus, this is the one that actually kind of does it.
it it kind of does, but even that kind of to me felt shoehorned in. The zero gravity scene, I liked the first half of it,
It goes on too long.
but they
Like you
kept
said,
it.
this movie is way too long.
it, it, and they keep on doing things that it's like, oh, you made everything seem less dangerous now. They did it with the face huggers. And the scene with all the acid, I was just like, get out of here. Come on, that's too much. Although I must say, the design of the pulse rifle in this movie, like the self-aiming pulse rifle, I think was genius. And that is some tech I think we'll be seeing in the future. If you like the Alien movies, it's one to watch. It disappointed me.
Yeah, it. I think this one is ultimately gonna kind of live and die by because they're doing a sequel by that movie. Like now that you've gotten kind of like Afterlife, now that we've gotten all the member berries out of the way, what are you gonna do that's new? And if
Yeah.
if if that kind of shits the bed, then this movie was all for naught. Like
Real quick, us two elements of this movie really reminded me of the fantastic game from 2013, Alien Isolation,
mhm.
which you should absolutely play. I think I'd rather watch Alien and play Alien Isolation, but there are segments of this I really liked.
Yeah,
It's a complicated one for me.
yeah. So my number 9 is weirdly complicated for me only because I honestly this is on my worst of list. I kind of want to give it most improved. Because this is the third movie in a franchise that, again, I said before we started, is a franchise that I don't like but can't seem to stop watching every time it comes out. Um, and that's Terrifier 3. So, Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2, the years they came out, were my number one worst movies of that year. They were just flat out. Like, I enjoy a good slash movie. I hate just like obnoxiously mean and overly long and just like we relish in the grossness of it. This one, because it added the element of it being kind of a Christmas slasher, and you get a lot of faces like Daniel Roebuck, Clint Howard shows up briefly to get murdered horribly. You have Art the Clown running around in a Santa costume with like Christmas tree sunglasses on. There's a scene involving a bunch of kids opening Christmas presents that made everybody like laugh, and then like immediately feel terrible for laughing, but still kind of enjoyed the laugh of it. It's not great, and I think that they said the last next was supposed to be kind of like the last one. We'll see, but as far as the three, it's the most one you can kind of have fun with. Whereas and it's still too long because this one is long. It's 2 hours. The second one was 2.5 hours, like almost 240. Um, but as far as the other two being the number one worst of this to being like barely on the list, I say good job.
Hey, that's an improvement, and I've yet to see any of them.
You're fine. You're fine.
I'm I'm a I have long been a defender of M. Night Shyamalan. I think he gets an unfair rap, and I think he's made a bunch of really enjoyable movies. Um, the movie that really stretches the credibility was Trap, starring the once extremely popular Josh Hartnett. It's about they're laying a trap for a serial killer at a concert. Um, some potential there, but I don't think Josh Hartnett was the right actor for this because he seems creepy. He's people are like, oh, nobody would suspect him. Anybody who knows this guy would be like, no, you probably suspect him. And M. Night Shyamalan's daughter plays the singer at this concert. She is shoehorned in the movie, and man, she cannot act. Plus, it gets to the point where it's just like, okay, it stretches any kind of credibility of him continually escaping and outmaneuvering everyone at every turn despite any circumstance. And, you know, and the movie leaves the concert, then keeps on going for a while. And it just does not keep up steam. There are a few scenes of tension. Overall, I think this was a pretty big failure. It's a disappointment. Um, didn't hate it. It should have been better, and they made some casting mistakes.
I wondered how long it would be before we lined up on something. Because Trap is my next one. Um, we went and saw it in the theater, and like based on the trailers, I was like, okay, like this is. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is this PG? It was PG-13, right? It wasn't R.
Yes, it was PG-13.
So I remember thinking, I don't know, we didn't go to the theater. We watched it at home, I think. But anyway, it was just like, okay. So I'm watching it, and everything at the concert I'm down with. Okay, so he's a serial killer, and he's a serial killer, like you said, like Dexter's a serial killer, where you spend 5 minutes with him, you're like, oh, that's the guy, like clearly.
Yeah,
Um, but I like Josh Hartnett, and I'm glad he's back and stuff. Because he was in movie jail forever, and he was on that criminally underrated Penny Dreadful, but nobody talked about Hartnett, and then Oppenheimer got him back in the light. This movie, number one, could have used an R rating because there's only one maiming in the movie. There's not even he's a serial killer who doesn't kill anybody in the movie.
yeah.
Like he severely burns a woman, but like he doesn't kill anybody, and then like everything keeps happening like stupidly. Um, but really, like what got me was like when we leave the concert, and I was like, "There's still 40 minutes left in this movie." And then
Yeah.
the daughter, who was fine, and I get it what she's the stand-in for. That's great. Whatever. Cast your kids. I've defended Rob Zombie putting his wife in his own movies because I'd want to work with my family too. But whatever. But for the movie to become about her being like this weird hero was so stupid. And then like you set up, you have Patty. Oh my God, what is her name? From the original Parent Trap. She's like the Dr. Loomis in this movie who does nothing.
Yes. Yeah. She's kind of thrown in the movie. You're like, okay, she's seems like she has more significant that she's supposed to be more significant than she is, and
It feels like he wrote the movie and they shot it and they got to the end of them leaving and he was like, wait, how oh, it's only 60 minutes? Oh shit. And then
yeah,
they go to his house and like yeah, once they leave the venue that movie like crumbles to
it,
pieces.
it just disintegrates. It had issues before that happened, but it really falls apart afterwards. I hope M. Night Shyamalan can get something on track, but this wasn't it. I and I'll be honest, the more we're talking about it, it should probably been higher on my worst of list because
Yeah.
there's just not a whole lot I liked about it.
Yeah.
Oh, keeping on with the theme of horror or thrillers, um, Russell Crowe seems to have kind of found himself at a point in his career where he just plays disinterested, burned out chubby guys. And unless it's the right kind of movie, like that dumb but fun movie Unhinged, it's not great. He's phoning it in. Uh, the Exorcism, which you might get confused with the Pope's Exorcist, which was another Exorcist movie that I believe literally came out last year, where Russell Crowe has something to do with exorcism. He's this alcoholic, unhinged actor, which kind of you think he's playing himself, that is on the set of this movie, and it's kind of riffing off the Exorcist of these exorcism movies where bad things happen on set. These sets are cursed, and oh man, what's going on here? It's a real demonic presence. It's just not that interesting. It's not that good. It's boring. It didn't do it for me. Russell Crowe seems tired and completely disinterested in this. There's just not much to say about it. And I've loved Russell Crowe in many things. This was not one of them.
I did watch this one. I will say that I loved the Pope's Exorcist because it was stupid and fun. It was a blast, stupid, dumb, fun horror movie. But this one, I remember watching the trailer, and it just looked like, oh, we kind of want to pretend like we're telling, like, because like it's like based on a whatever. And I was like, oh, is it? We want to tell the story about the Exorcist being cursed, the set being cursed, but we can't, so we made this one up. And then also it's kind of like it's weird that Russell Crowe's like doubling down on exorcism movies. Like that's just okay. I didn't
It
see
is
it,
it,
but it felt like if you really want to like watch something creepy to do with like just watch the Cursed film series where they talk about the stuff that happened on the set of The Exorcist.
it just it felt needless, and it kind of just be like did they get a 2-for-1 special? They paid him for one, and they got two Exorcist movies out of him. I've not seen the Pope's Exorcist, but I have to imagine it's more entertaining than this.
Dude, you
Special
see
work.
him riding a Vespa through Rome, dressed as a Catholic priest, and then it cuts to him riding a Vespa up to this home in Spain. So it's like through editing, he rode his Vespa from Vatican City to like Barcelona.
The movie should have been about that road trip.
So my number 7 is a movie that I should have enjoyed. Like if on paper, this movie should have ruled. Uh, and unfortunately, it. I don't know what happened, and the fact that again the biggest WTF is that this movie went to theaters. It's werewolves. So I'm
I
just like,
almost went to I almost went to watch that.
so it's like, okay, you're like, it's the purge, but with werewolves. And I was like, take my money. If Frank Grillo's fighting werewolves on Purge Night, sign me up. Unfortunately, two things. One, I wanted the Purge anarchy, and I got the Purge because it's a very contained, we're on a house movie. Um, and again, it's Frank Grillo who plays like he's like a scientist defending his his sister-in-law and niece because their home is being attacked because one night there's a supermoon and anybody caught in the moonlight turns into werewolves. Okay, we're using practical werewolf suits, which is why you only see 8 werewolves at a time, but that's fine. They look great. But this movie is so up its own butt serious sometimes. I'm just like, no, this movie should be fun. Like Lou Diamond Phillips plays like the king scientist in this movie. Like this movie should know what it is and relish it, and it's like it's trying to be something it's not, and it was so frustrating.
And I liked the concept, but in the back of my mind, it's like there's no way this can live up to it. Um, yeah, it sounded like it had the potential to be a fun B movie, but I have not heard promising things, and your testimony just backs that up. My number 6, some liked it, some didn't. I can admit there's some talent involved, but I'll be honest, I was never that curious about the bodily functions of Bigfoot. It's Sasquatch Sunset, which is kind of this faux nature documentary that follows around a family of Sasquatches as they wander around in the woods and fart and barf and have sex. And at one point, one of the guys has tries to have sex with a hole in a tree, and it's all of the. It's just like, okay, none of this is that interesting. I'm not a big fan of like using bodily functions for humor in movies anyway, but hey, it's funny every once in a while, but that's so much of the movie. Of course, they don't talk, so they're just walking around the woods grinning, grinning, grunting, and doing things, and it's never interesting or engaging, and it just lingers on stuff so long, and man, it didn't do it for me. Some people will like this. It seems to be one of those 50-50. You'll love it or hate it. It didn't do it for me at all.
I didn't get around to seeing it. I was going to. I was going to do a review for it. In fact, I made a. I may still have it in our Dropbox. I made a killer thumbnail for it, and then every time it came to press play, I just never could pull the trigger. I do know I got like a special edition 4K from I think Umbrella, and it's a giant fuzzy like bear, Bigfoot furry box, and that's kind of like the only thing I know about it. Just based on the trailer, I
Oh,
was like, I don't know this is gonna be something. I don't think I can do this for.
I could. I think it could have made a short movie. Something 30 minutes long or less. It just doesn't hold your attention. Though I will say, it is beautifully shot, cinematography beautiful, and I think they did a great job with the Sasquatch costumes. And that's it. That's the positive things I have to say about it. There's no meat on that bone. And they just focus so much on the bodily functions of Sasquatch. Oh,
Oh, it's the Fairley Brothers Sasquatch movie. Awesome. So I made a statement earlier about Speak No Evil being my hot take on this list, and then I was coming down as we were going, and I don't know, man, this might do it. And so, Logan, you might want to preemptively get a shot ready. Uh, my number six is Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. Um, Amber and I went to the theater and was like, okay, like we everything about it, we were in. Like, okay, and then we go and we're sitting in the theater, and I'm just like, I could tell like we were both not having this movie, but also afraid to like look at each other and confirm in case the other one was enjoying it. Uh, it looks great. I love that Tim Burton has gone back and done like classic Tim Burton, and he's just Tim Burton all over this movie. Michael Keaton is fantastic. It's great to see Catherine O'Hare. Um, as much as I this particular actor has a piece of my childhood with him, which sounds terrible, sounds utterly gross and terrible. There's way too much Jeffrey Jones not Jeffrey Jones in this movie for me. Um, that and then they make um Winona Ryder's character. They kind of make her stupid, and then all the stuff with Jenna Ortega, who I like Jenna Ortega, but her whole plot line is the first season of Wednesday. Like she falls in love with this cute guy, and oops a doodle, he's like a bad monster. Like that's the plot line of the first season of Wednesday, with just more Addams Family references and less Beetlejuice references. And I think it was when the scene where they go to the church and talk about member berries. This movie, the scene where they start singing the pizza or the wedding cake in the rain song, but it's totally just it's the daylight coming, me want to go home scene. Just 40 years later with a different song. I was like, man, come on, it's Beetlejuice. Like, I don't need this. Like, you're just kind of tainting the old one. And then that and the fact that Monica Bellucci's in this movie because she's like his current goth girlfriend, and she comes of nothing in this movie. There's so much plot in this movie for what you wanted was just it's Beetlejuice and he's back to shenanigans. But yeah, I remember us just sitting in the theater and the movie ended, and we walked out and we both looked at each other in the car and went, no. So I know a lot of people loved it, and it was great to see Michael Keaton as the character, but I did not like Beetlejuice at all.
um, uh, I will I will expand upon my thoughts on that shortly. Um, just maybe not the way you expect. Uh, as you know, as you could tell, I watch a lot of children's movies. My daughter is 17, but she still likes watching kids' movies, so we'll, use the movie pass, go hit them or watch them at home. We decided on one night to take a chance on a movie. The best I could say about it is I thought it was going to be drastically worse than it was. But if there was ever a children's book that did need a feature-length movie where the main character was an adult man as Harold in the Purple Crayon, um, I'm not sure why they decided to go this direction with it. Uh, and having Zachary Levi as Harold is just strange, and it it's probably higher in my list than it should be, or lower in my list. But it's such a it's such a misfire. It's the one. The more I thought about it, it's like this movie was an awful idea. You might have been able to do something cute with it, but if you really want to see Harold with the purple crown, there's a short cartoon about it, and it's a book we all loved, but it was such a weird adaptation. I don't know what they were thinking. It said I thought it was going to be worse. It's like, oh, that wasn't as bad as they thought, and that's all I could say about it. I try to limit the children's movies on my list this year, but yeah, that's the only one I'm on my worst of list. Not much to say. No meat on that bone.
I didn't see it, and I won't jump on the
Of
the Zachary Levi sucks as a person because it's the Simpsons meme of like, stop beating him, he's already dead. um, but no, I just on top of everything else, I didn't. None of his last few movies have even looked good, so I did not catch
No,
this one.
I like the guy generally, and some of the things I've seen. I thought he was great in Shazam, but he is really on the decline. And
So my number five is a movie that you and I have talked about all year long. It's a movie that I it probably would have been like lower on the list had I got to watch it with anybody but myself. Um, because even my wife was just like, "No, I'm not watching that. You're a lone man on an island." Um, and it's Megalopolis. Um, I wrote down, "You either die a hero of New Hollywood or you live to direct Megalopolis." The fact that Brian De Palma of that group, Coppola, Spielberg, Scorsese, all those guys, the fact that Brian De Palma has been in movie jail for near on 20 years, but Francis Ford Coppola got to make this giant, weird. Granted, he made it with his own money. Brian De Palma, if you're listening, start your own vineyard. Do something to make a lot of money. This movie was insane. Um, I love Lynch. I love Dream Logic. I love artsy fartsy nonsense, as Amber puts it. Uh, and I love watching a train wreck. But this movie is a slog. If you see any clips of it online, like in doses, this movie can be funny. John Voight asking Aubrey Plaza what she thinks about his boner before he shoots her with a crossbow is amazing. But that scene comes like 2 hours in and is just like surrounded by not imagine it's like Terry Gilliam, but not like good Terry Gilliam made Dark City with like Tommy was so wrote it. Like it's just trash, and the fact that so many big names are in it is just like I want to be in a Francis Ford Coppola movie. At no point does anybody go, maybe he doesn't have it anymore. Maybe we don't, and that's fine. Maybe we can stop making movies. And I feel like what's gonna be sad is this is probably gonna be his last movie. And from the
oh,
guy who made Apocalypse Now and The Godfathers and Dracula and all that stuff to be like to go out on this like giant weird kind of self suck fart of a movie is really sad, but it is not a good movie. It might be fun with
I
beers and friends, but other than that, it sucks.
they showed it. I was either in Dolby or IMAX for like a weekend here in Spokane, and something came up, and I was unable to go see it. I had I knew this movie was going to be a boondoggle and a mess, but I wanted to go see the spectacle
Mm-hmm.
on the biggest screen possible. Um, Anybody could watch the trailer and know this movie was not going to work. I have not seen it, but it's one of those. I'll have to watch it at some point just for the sheer spectacle of it. The fact that he sold off part of his wine business to fund this, just nobody would back it. I kind of feel bad for the guy, but
Yeah.
yeah, your said your review echoes lot of what I've heard because man, it showed up in a lot of worst of lists.
Yeah, it's
My
like
number four.
honestly, I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
finish up with honestly, you get a group of your guys, you get some beers, you get some burgers. I think it's a blast. But just like
I could see
me
that.
sitting here in like the cold light of day alone, like a pre-lunch movie, like no.
My number four is one that popped up on a bunch of worst of lists, so I had to watch it, and it's like, okay, it's not. I mean, it looks like a misfire, but it's not that bad. No, it's that bad. It's pulls a bait and switch on you in terms of what kind of genre it is, and for a movie that's blatantly going for some sort of social commentary, it is completely toothless. And they're going. It's like they have this movie as a provocative name, but just it fails. It's the American Society of Magical Negroes. It is, it's playing off the trope of the magic black person, in these movies like The Legend of Bagger Vance, where you have this sagely black character come in and he's kind of magical and helps the white guy along on his journey and success, um, while offering folksy wisdom. Cool. I mean, that trope has been around for a very long time and it exists. This made me think they should make a documentary about that because I think that would shed some interesting light on it. Because this movie does not. The main character, it's not at all interesting or compelling. I can't remember a dude's name off the top of my head. He's from I saw the TV Glow and Detective Pikachu. Um, you know, he's not an appealing character. It doesn't work. He is not much of a leading man. What I've seen thus far, David Allen Greer is great, but not given anything to do. Uh, it, in this movie, it's like, okay, we're gonna have some commentary, but then it's like, oh wait, it's a romantic comedy and a really shitty one at that. It it if it tries kind of to deliver a message, it fails. It's not funny. It's not entertaining. It's really a dumb, poorly written movie, and it's a shame they had some genuine talent involved because it does not work at all. And it's yeah, man, it was kind of a misfire to behold. I don't know. That's the thing is, I don't know if making a parody fiction movie out of this was the right way to even go. But if it could be done, they definitely didn't pull it off.
So it makes me, yeah, because I remember hearing about it, and then yeah, like you said, that trope has been. As somebody who's read a lot of Stephen King, trust me, I'm well aware of that trope, because it's like one of his go tos. um,
Yes.
that and haunted objects, but yeah, like I just never heard anything good about it. But like you said, the idea, like pitching it as a documentary, something kind of like the line on the lines of, I don't know if you ever watched horror noir that came out a few years
Yes.
ago about black horror films. Like that's where this should topic should have been. But not knowing anything about it, and then you saying it's a romantic comedy was just like what?
Well, it does, and it launches into it, and like, not far into the movie, it's like, oh, now it's a romance movie, which is completely it. It's such a terrible bait and switch to do this, and just any kind of momentum it had, which was already barely any, is completely deflated. It's bad. It is a lousy movie, and it doesn't succeed on any level at conveying any kind of message, or about social, any kind of social commentary. It just fails on every level.
So my number four, um, and if Logan was mad about Trap, he's definitely gonna be mad about this. Um, my number four is The Crow. Um, now I honestly going into this list, I figured this was gonna be vying for number one. Like there was just no way this movie was not gonna be number one. Unfortunately, and we reviewed it on our Crow live. It's just too boring to be worse than my bottom three movies. Like it was like this movie is the equivalent of like farting at a football game. Like it's just lost to time. Like it's not so bad it's good. It's not so bad it's fun to talk about. It was just like, yeah, that happened. Remember? No, you don't remember. You didn't see it. Oh well, then you're fine. Especially going off of something like the ones that are bad but are fun to talk about. Like we talked about Wicked Prayer, which is a terrible. It is, on all purposes, a worse Crow movie than this. But I will watch 10 more times before I watch this remake again because this remake, it was just so boring and the most cookie cutter of just nonsense.
I I want to build off that because my number three is The Crow. Yes, why they dedicated half of this movie to the romance between a pair of people who are in rehab or coming out or escape rehab is beyond me. Neither of which are likable or interesting. The woman who plays Shelley cannot act. It is it is boring. It is dumb. It is just it is such a terrible remake. It is again. There's one fight scene with the sword that's kind of entertaining. That's it. I don't know how they talked Danny Houston into doing this movie. They didn't give him much to do anyway. It's just I go to the other dimension where it's just a bunch of train tracks and stuff, and visually this movie's dull. But the man, it's like Shelley and Eric are just they're unlikable characters who you have no emotional interest in. You know, in the original, when we did the Crow episode recently, the original Crow doesn't show a ton about the romance between Eric and Shelley, but it's talked about, it's shown in a few flashbacks, and you get the feeling that it was this very passionate, tender, intimate love that was really something for the ages. You know, something where somebody would come back from the dead to avenge losing that love. You don't get that here at all. They hang out and do drugs for a weekend, and now he's coming back from the dead to avenge her. I don't buy it. This movie pissed me off. It's terrible. I hate it.
So my number three, I famously or infamously took a whole year last year off of any comic book movies whatsoever. Um, but there was one that was coming out, aside from The Crow, one that was coming out that I was genuinely curious about because of the film the creator finally been able to do his own thing. He had full creative control over the film, and it's a franchise that, for better or worse, I've loved all three entries. This movie sucked so bad. It's Hellboy the Crooked Man.
Ooh,
Look, I hope all of you who shit on the David Harbour Hellboy of 2019 are happy with yourselves because this is what we got now. This borderline fan made piece of garbage where it's like what is it's Hellboy who like walks around the movie going, huh, what? Huh. And he looks like I'm getting my picture taken with him while he's smoking a cigarette at Texas Frightmare Weekend. He's just running through the woods with that dude from Yellowstone, who honestly is the highlight of this movie because I'm like, oh shit, it's that guy from Yellowstone. Um, and like they're just hunting Kentucky witches, and like this crooked man that's even less cool than the crooked man that was in The Conjuring 2 that we were supposed to get a spinoff of, but they were like, no, that's stupid. Let's not do that. Let's have Hellboy fight the Crooked Man instead. This was abysmal.
I actually watched the trailer for it. My friend Tommy and I watched the trailer. I was shocked at how cheap it looked. I knew they didn't have as much budget to deal with this time. I couldn't believe how bad it looked. It just how it's like okay, they're at a cabin in the woods and it's Hellboy running around in a cabin in the woods. They had no budget for this and it appears no talent. I You told me that's like, oh, if you need to watch something bad, watch Hellboy Crooked Man, and I think the trailer was enough. I'm good.
It looked like in high school when we were like, we're gonna make a Friday the 13th movie. Like it was on par with that, only with less cool characters. Yeah, like it
Far
was.
less cool characters.
Like I said, the Ron Perlman movies are great. We all wish we would have gotten the third Hellboy with Ron Perlman. But I liked the David Harbour movie. I think it was fun. I think he was a great uh, person to kind of pick up that character. I like 2019's Hellboy, and the fact that everybody just crapped all over that movie to where this is what we get now is absurd.
2019 Hellboy wasn't that bad. I think it could have been better. Overall, I liked it just fine.
Mm.
You know what I didn't like? Fine. My number two pick. I hated this movie. And it's one I strongly believe you and I will have a difference of opinion on, but I I came away from it not knowing how anyone could take this seriously as a movie. If you like it as some sort of weird parody of 90s thrillers, cool. It's Longlegs with Nicolas Cage. It's a fucking stupid movie. What movie is Nicolas Cage in? Anytime he comes on screen in white pancake makeup, it is the opposite of frightening. But this movie takes itself deadly seriously. It's got a convoluted storyline that goes in some bizarre directions that are nonsensical. It I wasn't the only there was a slight bit of tension sometimes, but this movie took itself seriously. Then we got Nicolas Cage yelling in pancake makeup. It I did, whatever they're trying to do, I think it failed. Um, wasn't fun. It wasn't funny. It's not entertaining. As I said, if you're watching it as I can't believe they made this and it's fun, cool. I and I didn't buy into the hype. I never buy into the hype of it's the scariest horror movie ever. No, I didn't expect that. I think I went in with very reasonable expectations. But again, we had another case and another year with what movie is Nicolas Cage in? Because he doesn't seem to know because it is so out of sync from anything else in this movie. Also, the main character, the main FBI agent, she's boring and uninteresting. And I like her fine. That the actor, I liked her in It Follows. She was good in that, but this is a very polarizing movie, but I really, really didn't like it.
I will share my thoughts on long legs here in a bit. My number two. Now that I'm looking at my listeners, as somebody who like tries to downplay the idea of as being somebody who hates remakes, there's a lot of remakes on my list. My number two is a movie that I wanted to keep an open mind with because I don't hold the original in like some high altar like pillar of cinema. But this movie just would not stop making me angry, and it was Roadhouse. Um, look, it's like 2 hours of Jake Gyllenhaal playing Ryan Reynolds while Conor McGregor plays the Joker. Um, like it totally misses the idea of like a roadhouse, what a roadhouse is, what a cooler is, and it just turns into like a bad episode of Burn Notice for 2 hours. Um, and the fact that they were like, we use all this CGI, like these computer effects, like the punches, it really looks like they're punching each other in the face. What it does is it makes the camera work look atrocious during the fight scenes. I don't like this guy's Dan Lyman. I didn't like his Bourne movies. Like I can't take the camera is everywhere shaking all the time. You don't know where you are, and the fact that we're fighting in a bar and I don't know what is up and down. And again, it's a bad episode of like pick a CBS like cop procedural that your grandparents watch before Blue Bloods comes on, and it is that. Like this movie was terrible, and the fact that it's getting a sequel, shut up. Like it was so bad.
That is news to me. I didn't know it was getting a sequel. Um, Never watched it. Roadhouse, the original, holds a very special place in my heart, and I didn't want to disturb that. So I was tempted to watch it. I left it alone. Um, Roadhouse is a movie that could only work at the time it was made with the people it was made with. Otherwise, it's a no go.
I will say this before. I make a joke about Conor McGregor playing the Joker in that movie, even though there's no reason for him to do so. You could theoretically, if you wanted to make like a weird, like ultra violent but goofy Popeye movie, you just get Conor McGregor from this movie because I swear he's just walking around going like he's just he's in it. Talk about somebody in a different movie than what the rest of everybody else is doing. But and I love Jake Gyllenhaal, but he is just playing Ryan Reynolds, just a quirky, smirky asshole in this whole movie. It's so bad.
Yeah, hard pass. Well, Roadhouse worked in the 80s with Patrick Swayze. But my number one is a movie that wouldn't work in any time period with any amount of talent, with whatever budget, with whatever writer, because this movie should have never, ever, ever been made. And it is a movie. People say it's like nobody asked for this movie. No, I don't think literally no one asked for this movie. And it is topped off many worst of lists. It is a new low for the comic book movie genre. It is the horrible Madam Web. Now, I watch Madam Web strictly because I was trying to knock out some bad movies. Um, it is amazing it got released. I it's one of those movies that you can't think it's like, oh, they release it in one theater just to cover the bases so they can retain the rights. And this is a movie they made so they could retain the rights to these Spider-Man characters. That's also we got Craven the Hunter. But it's it's worse than you can imagine. The editing's bad. The acting's bad. Dakota Johnson is just sleepwalking through this movie. The guy who plays the main villain, who dresses like Spider-Man but isn't Spider-Man, is I think a part of it is the dubbing is so bad. His lines are just terrible and they all look terrible. It teases with the trailer like, oh, you get some of the Spider Women. They're in a flashback. You see them for all of 10 seconds, if that. It's dumb at every turn. It has some hilariously obvious product placement. In the end, you're just like, oh, that's how it ended? Okay, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. This movie is dumb. It is an insult to anybody who ever picked up a comic book. And out of all the characters, all the weird Spider-Man characters you could do a movie out of, Madam Web, really, who most people who know about Madam Web probably remember her vaguely from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. It's it fails technically, and it's funny because they're having to like they're gonna have to like kind of avoid saying certain things and calling characters by certain names because they don't have the rights to them, and it is awkward. It is such a terrible entry into the Spider-Man universe. Madam Web wouldn't be terribly interesting in a Spider-Man movie. Without a Spider-Man movie, it is crazily bad. It's one of those I was astonished by this movie. It just how horrible they make it. It is, in my opinion, the worst superhero comic book movie of all time by a pretty good margin.
So at one point, we talked about doing a live where we talked about and ranked like all the Sony Spider Verse movies. And if we do ever get around to that, that and only then is when I will watch Madam Web.
I I will say I suggested that episode. I think it would make an interesting episode because I think with our knowledge of comic books and movies, we could kind of really dissect it. But man, did this go? Did Sony and their Spider Verse go so horribly wrong? This is something that should be studied for generations to see how badly they handled it.
How do you cock up a moneymaker? You let Sony make Spider-Man movies that don't have Spider-Man in it.
Well, and I said this is all in the name of retaining the rights
Mm-hmm.
to the characters, and it shows.
So my number one um, is kind of the hell of my own making. Because this movie got announced a few years ago, and then just kept being kind of pushed back and pushed back. And then when the studio that made it started just like randomly like erasing movies from existence, with Batgirl and that Looney Tunes movie, I was like, no, don't do it with this one. I want to see this one. And then they finally released it on Max this year, and god damn it, it's Salem's Lot. Um, like I feel like I willed this movie to come out, and I'm so upset with myself. This the best way I can describe Nick if you haven't watched Salem's Lot is. Do you remember in high school, middle school, high school when we would watch this Toby Hooper Salem's Lot?
Yes.
All right, imagine that's when you watched Salem's Lot. You didn't watch it or read the book again until 2024, and then you describe that movie to your wife like a book report. That's how faithful this movie is to either that original Salem's Lot movie or the book itself. Like it is, and the fact that they set it in the 70s for no reason, and we're just like zipping through this movie. Like somewhere there's got to be like a 6 hour cut of this movie because it is weird, just jumping all through that book. And it's not a long book. It's like a 300-page novel about a town that turns into vampires. It shouldn't be that hard to do, and now this is the third adaptation of it. Um, and this is even worse than that 2004 Rob Lowe version. Because at least those characters were real people. Like this movie, it just like I said, it's like it's trying to tell me Salem's Lot from memory. But like it's kind of drunk. It's like drunk history of Salem's Lot. Like it's just the worst adaptation of a Stephen King movie outside of The Dark Tower because The Dark Tower doesn't exist as a film. This was just a giant pile of shit, and I was so angry. I was so angry because I wanted this movie to come out for so long, and for to finally get it, and for it to be as bad as it was. It could not be my number one worst of 2024.
You and I talked recently, and I told you that there was a movie that I was wondering if it would show up in your list, and it was Salem's Lot. Because I know you take bad Stephen King adaptations pretty hard, and I had heard some really bad things about it, which is disappointing. I planned to watch it, didn't get around to it. I love Toby Hooper's Salem's Lot. It's one of my favorite vampire movies. I think it's great. And early things I saw didn't look promising. I was pretty certain this was going to make on your worst list and know it'd be number one. However, I'm not surprised. Uh, so disappointing. I mean, the 2004 one with Rob Lowe wasn't great, but that's a lot better than this one.
Yeah, because at least that one had a cast. This is a
Yeah,
like it's like Bill Pullman's son's like the big name in the movies. That's your best. That's your best pull. Is like, hey, it's that kind of looks like is that Bill Pullman's kid? I think so. Like, yeah, okay. Like that's. Oh, and the actress who plays not Viola Davis. I'm gonna be a big old piece of shit for not remember her name. From oh my god, she's in a bunch of stuff. I cannot remember her name, but she plays the teacher. No, the doctor. She plays the doctor character. I cannot remember her name, and it's killing me. But like, she was the big name, and she's like fifth build.
and it's disappointing. I mean, there's stuff. There seems like there should be some pretty good source material to draw from, um, and it's just not executed. We now have four Salem's Lot movies. Only one of them is worth a damn. So
Yeah.
to stop. Although Returning to Salem's Lot is entertaining, it is not a good movie at all.
And again,
So
it's an like it should be an easier King to adapt. It's just a
really, it
town corrupted
should.
by vampirism, and it's one of his shorter books. It's not like you have to like build a world out like I'm not asking you to do the Tommy Knockers or something. Like it's just people get turned into vampires in this small town in Maine. Like that's it. Like how do you keep messing that up?
Simple enough. Was it the? I don't know. Not a whole lot. I would just absolutely hated. A lot of stuff I was underwhelmed by. But I could definitely say at the top four, I did hate.
Yeah.
Um, it definitely should be avoided. To Saphira the Reborn. Hi, Tommy's point. Yes, idea of putting these side characters or support characters in their main movie without any involvement from the main characters it's based off of is rarely if ever going to work. And these cash grabs to hold on to the rights are they are pathetic, and I hope we avoid those.
At least Roger Corman had the good sense not to release it. Although to be fair, that is still
Yeah,
like currently the best Fantastic Four movie, so maybe he should have. But at least he had the good sense not to.
yeah. No, and it's that movie at least is kind of fun looking. Madam Web, Madam Web is one that's like you could watch it and roast it. That's the entertainment value, but it, astonishing. But
So
things get better from here.
that's right. I do want to ask real quick on for Logan is so it reminds you of the Terror, like the TV show The Terror, like based on the novel about the Franklin expedition, or like the Terror, like the movie from like the 40s.
He's talking about the TV show, the
Okay,
more recent one.
because I like the TV. I mean that I like that TV show. At least the first season. I know they did like a different book. The second season still called it The Terror. Um, it's easier to watch that show than read that book. That book is a doorstopper. So I will lead off then with honorable mentions because now we're being positive. We were little negative Nancy's, and then there are movies that may cross over. There's some that I'm gonna be real fun to talk about. It turns out. But first off, I'm gonna hit you with some of my honorable mentions. I've got four. Since we kind of hit Alien Romulus there. Um, One that I watched late. So in a violent nature, it's kind of a fun deconstructed slasher movie. I like the idea of being like, what is it like for Jason in between kills? Especially because on the TV we have, I bought those LED lights that kind of like light up with the movie. So it was a lot of fun watching it do that as he's walking through the trees and stuff. Um, One I'll just hit because it was a lot of fun. Right here, right now. Not a lot of people are going to be interested in it. It was the Ghost concert film they put out. So if you enjoy Ghost music and their stage show, it's a lot of fun. It kind of carries on there. I'm a sucker for a band with lore. Um, I like the fact that Ghost looks like they look, but all their songs sound like REO Speedwagon, and I'm totally kind of here like satanic REO Speedwagon, and I'm here for it. And it was a fun concert film. They don't come to Oklahoma, when they're on concert because it's Oklahoma. So it was kind of fun to go see them, and the idea of the two like musical acts to get concerts in the theater were Taylor Swift, who is arguably the number one entertainer in the world, and then the band Ghost. So if you're interested, check it out. It'd be a fun place. If you want to get into Ghost, it'd be a fun place to start. And then my last honorable mention is Abigail. Um, I like Radio Silence. I'm sad they kind of got boned on their Scream trilogy. Abigail is a ton of fun. I wish the trailer hadn't given away the twist of the movie, but this is like a pitch perfect horror comedy because it is so funny and yet it still has some genuinely scary parts. And then when it goes off the rails, like gore wise, it fully commits. It's an absolute blast. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch Abigail. It's a ton of fun.
I unfortunately have not seen it, but I've heard so many positive reviews. I got to get around to watching that. I did go see it in Violent Nature in the theaters, and I really liked it. It didn't quite make my top 10. I mean, honestly, it's quite slow, but it's kind of the nature of the beast with the movie because you're following around this entity. Beautifully shot. I like the lack of music, the quiet. There's some awesome kills. That ending, I'll be honest, I could see why it disappoints somebody, but I was just waiting, and I think that's kind of the point. Um, I liked it. I think, given what they had to work with, I think they succeeded pretty well. It is not for everyone's taste, but I thought it was well done. I've got two on my honorable mentions. First, I'll get this out of the way. I thought they did a pretty good job with this movie, considering they're following up some 35 years later. I liked Beetlejuice. I can understand it's not for everyone. I think part of it was is it just turned out better than I was expecting. It's quite similar to the first one in a lot of ways. You have the beautiful Monica Bellucci in it, who is kinda, I don't know why she's in that movie. By the end of it, I couldn't quite figure out. They made her kind of seem like this big bad, and she doesn't really. She's kind of there. Other than that, I like seeing Winona Ryder. Um, Jenna Ortega's Jenna Ortega. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it's like we got another, and I thought solid Beetlejuice movie, and I was glad to see it, especially given the fact that it didn't have high expectations. I still enjoyed it. What my number, my other honorable mention, it felt just a little short, but man, I had a really good time seeing it in the theater, and seeing it in the theater is the way to see it. It's A Quiet Place Day One. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting to see those monsters in that setting and seeing everyone having to adapt to what's going on. Uh, there's an adorable cat that is one of the three main characters. It's I thought they did a really good job of it. There's some tension, and there was we were in the theater. You could hear a pin drop. Then somebody coughs in the theater, and everyone jumps. It was great. It's one of those. One of those. It's like the theater experience really amplified it for me. I think it's a really good entry into the now trilogy, and I really like the Quiet Place movies.
All right, so I didn't get to see it. I need to watch the second one too. Like I remember going to see the first one in the theater and liking it, even though I was in a theater. It was like 11 o'clock on a Saturday, and I remember the speakers at the theater were fuzzy, and so like occasionally through the movie you get weird like hissy popping from the speakers, which isn't what you want in a movie called A Quiet Place. Also, the two women in the row with me were eating hot dogs at 11 o'clock in the morning, and just opening that tinfoil as loudly as humanly possible. So I do want to see this one, but I just haven't got around to watching it yet.
I think
So my
it's well
number.
done. It,
No, go
it
ahead.
I would say it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's kind of what you would expect, but it delivers on what it promises.
So I'll start with my number 10 this time. And this is a movie that, much like Oppenheimer, because of the great acting and the pacing, it makes what would be a very dull movie edge of your seat watching, and it's Conclave. It's just a bunch of really good actors in a room trying to elect the next pope. I mean, you've got Ray Fiennes, John Lithgow is in it. Um, Isabella Rossellini's in it. Like it's just a stacked cast of these like great actors, and we're just electing a new pope. And the whole time you're just like, oh my god, like, and I as somebody who's really like only interest in Catholicism is either we're fighting Monstars or like Ezio's fighting the Pope at the end of one of those Assassin's Creed games. Like that's the beginning and the ending of like my interest in Catholicism. Mostly in the monsters because Catholic magic movies are fun for me. This is not a Catholic magic movie, but it's just really good actors acting their asses off. The movie does a good job of like also like at the very end, kind of like softballing a little bit of a timely message in there. Um, it was just a really like a movie like I was sitting here to end it, and Amber was just kind of like, "How was that?" And I was like, "It was a movie about men sitting in a room counting like who should be the next pope," and I was riveted the whole time. So if you're interested in like really talky, really good acting movies, it's a fun one to watch.
I have a movie that describes too in my top 10 list, but I'll get to that in a bit. Last year included a movie which, you know, maybe wasn't overall technically the best movie, but it was a movie that it gave me what I wanted and I enjoyed it. And I think throwing in kind of a fun, almost B grade movie is something I like doing every year. Earlier this year, I believe it was almost a year ago in February, oh, maybe a little over a year ago, I went to go see the Regal Mystery movie where you don't, they're going to show you a movie a few weeks earlier. You don't know what it is. So I went with my friends Travis and Mike, and it turned out to be this fun little horror movie called Sting. About in the middle of a snowstorm, this small little meteorite lands in this apartment, and out comes this alien spider. This little girl catches it and keeps it as a pet, and she starts feeding it. It starts growing rapidly. Well, then of course, what happens? Giant alien spider gets loose of the building. But holy cow, is this movie fun! Has great kills, a great setting in this old apartment building. The main character, the little girl, is actually really good and very likable. And it has this practical effects climax, which is just awesome. Seeing a good low budget indie monster movie pull off this well was inspiring. I enjoyed every minute of it. However, if spiders really creep you out, this movie will really creep you out. My friend Travis went with me, and he enjoyed it, but the spider creep factor got to him a little bit. But I, this one came out of nowhere, and I had to include it. I just really enjoyed it.
I'll pass, but it sounds great.
I figured.
So my number nine um, is a movie that I don't like. I really enjoyed it technically. I think the longer it's been since I've seen it, and having rewatched it in preparation, I enjoyed it a whole lot more than I originally did coming out of the theater, and I'm not sure why. Uh, and it's Furiosa. I love Fury Road. I thought it was great, and the fact that when they announced like, "Hey, we're gonna do a Furiosa movie," I was like, "Fantastic! That's great. Let's do it." And then it just kind of felt like time, like it. I think sitting there in the theater, it almost felt. Now, this is a much better film than what I'm gonna compare it to. Was when we went and watched Sin City 2. And I was like, man, if this movie had come out like 5 or 6 years ago, this would have been great. But it's a little too late. And this movie borderline is there. Uh, but the character is so great. It's sad that it's not Charlize Theron. Anya Taylor Joy is great. I think this is Chris Hemsworth's best movie, bar none. I think he is fantastic in this movie. Um, and what honestly may be George Miller's last Mad Max movie, it's a one to go out with because it's a lot of fun. The fact that it's the rare prequel that really like works and gives you something completely new while also being like, but where it's going to end, but still gives you so much more fun. And it's just another entry in this amazing world that he created all these years ago with the first Mad Max. I really did enjoy it.
I will I will be hitting I'll be hitting up Furiosa here in a bit. So, and I will share my thoughts on it then, and we'll discuss it a bit. Uh, my number nine is also part of a series, and a series I've come to believe is a great modern day trilogy. I think you had X come out, then you had the prequel Pearl come out, and this year, 2024, we had Maxine come out, which is the last of this trilogy in the X trilogy, following the exploits of a character from the movie X, played by Mia Goth, Maxine, as she navigates fame and acting in a variety of pictures in Hollywood in 1985 during the reign of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, when he had the terror LA under the grip of terror. A lot of people didn't care for this one as much as the other two, and I will say, out of the three, it may be the least good, but it's just the least good. I think it's still really good. It really feels like you're in Hollywood in the 1980s. It does such a good job with the clothes, the look, and how nasty and grimy Hollywood was in those days. It was just, I mean, the porn theaters and just the dirtiness, the protests, and the general fear from serial killers being on the loose. Mia Goth is great. She is so talented, and I thought she was very talented in Maxine. I enjoyed it. It went in some unexpected directions. Kevin Bacon shows up as a sleazy, creepy PI and I think does just a great job. It, I think Pearl's the best. Followed up by X, but Maxine is a very worthy addition. I enjoyed it beginning to end. I think it's got style in spades. Uh, there's so much creativity visually here with camera work, and the kills are really well executed. And it gets pretty brutal at times, unexpectedly brutal at times, but I really liked it.
My number eight, because my number eight. We'll talk about Maxine here later. So my number eight is another sequel that came out this year. It's Dune Part Two. Um, it continues where Part One left off. Uh, like this movie literally only has one criticism for me, and it's though I love him, Christopher Walken as the Emperor is a weird bit of casting because everybody else is cast really kind of pitch perfect. I love Austin Butler as Fade Ray or Fade Rotha.
Yeah.
Um, and the stuff that takes place on the Harkonnen planet, like the black and white stuff. As a filmmaker, like this is a filmmaker's movie. Denis Villeneuve he's on my Mount Rushmore. I love it. I love the fact that this movie leans into the fact that Paul Atreides isn't a good guy. I know they're going to do Messiah as kind of like the third, like a Dune Part 3, and kind of do it as do the Paul Atreides story as a trilogy. I'm totally down for that. As much as I'd love to see God Emperor Worm King Leto the Second, and if anybody could sell it to me, it's Denis Villeneuve. But I loved it and everything. It's just it's a it's perfect sci-fi. And again, even watching this one, even more so. Like I was talking to a guy at work who's a huge Star Wars fan. He's never seen these, and I was like, you should watch them, or maybe you shouldn't, because knowing that this book came out like 10 years before Star Wars, you're gonna see how much of it has been ripped off by not just Lucas, but by every sci-fi movie sense. But
Yeah.
I love the Dune, I love the Lynch one, but Dune one and Dune two, that they're just perfect sci-fi films, and they're fantastic adaptations.
I remember you the first time I showed you David Lynch's Dude back when we were much younger. You did not care for it, but that's the kind of movie that I don't blame anyone for not caring for it, even though I love it. As you could expect, Dune Part 2 will show up later on my list, so I will reserve my comments until then. Uh, Number 8 might be the best made movie on this list. It is visually amazing. I like the writing's good. The acting, for the most part, is pretty great. And just for sheer gothic horror, the remake of Nosferatu absolutely nailed it. I think it's a great vampire movie, and I love it when they make a vampire movie where the vampires aren't sexy, they're inhuman monsters. They did such a good job with the design of Count Orlok, and of course, played so well by Bill Skarsgård. That's it. Had to remember who it was. I have not seen much of the way of Robert Eggers films, but I could see what the hype was about because man, the guy's got a great eye for film and building a great scene. The stuff on the road with Nicholas Hoult, who does a wonderful job in this movie, on the way to Transylvania is great. The world building is extremely well done. It's well acted. I said my only caveat is I think they should have got somebody besides Lily Rose Depp. She wasn't terrible. I think she was the weakest actor in the movie. Still, I I quite for a classic gothic monster movie, especially a vampire movie, extremely well done.
I'll dive a little bit into Nosferatu. I'll sink my teeth in Nosferatu here in a moment. So my number seven is is a movie that I know a lot is getting a lot of buzz right now, rightfully so. With the awards coming up, I hope that the main actress wins because she should. And it's The Substance. I love a good body horror movie, and the fact that you with Demi Moore with this, you look at something like Nicole Kidman in Baby Girl, or she's got a new horror movie coming out this year called Holland. I love that these aging actresses are kind of like taking the Toni Collette route of like dipping their toes into horror and like giving these knockout performances and roles that with any less caliber of an actress probably wouldn't work because they are the quality that they are. They do so much for these movies, and that's not to take anything away from Margaret Qualley. She is fantastic in this movie, but for to not have
Yes.
thought about Demi Moore at all in years, and to be like, oh, Demi Moore's in this new horror movie, and then to see what she puts herself through in this movie, holy shit! And Dennis Quaid, for somebody who I didn't talk about on the worst stuff because I didn't even bother watching that Reagan movie, but you want to give me, I don't care about like super religious Dennis Quaid, but you give me like coked out of his mind Dennis Quaid, I am here for it. And this is a movie that I feel like just kind of came out of nowhere and has really kind of hit its stride during award season, and I really hope that Demi Moore takes on that top prize tomorrow because she earned it, man. And she does a lot in this film that you would not expect uh, an actress her age, much less an actress of her caliber, to be doing at that age.
I love the substance, and it will come up shortly, and I will expand upon that. I'm with you. I hope Demi Ward wins it. That would be amazing, and I'm happy she's making a roaring career comeback. Uh, Next one, my number 7 contains an actor who I wouldn't say necessarily he's been gone. It's just he doesn't have the same popularity he once did. And man, I didn't know he had a range like this where he could pull off this role. It's Heretic, starring Hugh Grant. I I don't like this saying a movie is smart because a lot of times I've heard that used like, oh, it's such a smart movie. I've heard that term used on a lot of really dumb movies. Heretic's a smart movie. It's very talky. It's very well written. But the tension in this movie is absolutely unreal. It's about this pair of Mormon missionaries, these young women who are going around preaching the word, and they go to this man's house, and he lets them in, and he traps them in this house, in this insane maze-like house that he's constructed, and and seeks to kind of deconstruct their beliefs and religions. There's this real duel of the minds going on with these two young women versus Hugh Grant, who is this master manipulator and planner in trying to figure out what's going to happen, where things are going to go, what's going to unfold. I didn't know where it was going next. Hugh Grant does a phenomenal job. So do the two young women, and that's real. I mean, this movie's almost entirely just three people in this home. The design of the home is really neat too, and it's so creepy. It's not the fastest paced movie. I said there's a lot of talking, and I know it's a movie not for everyone, but man, did it for me. As Tommy said, elevated horror. Yes, I was so impressed with this, and it could have really gone in a direction where it was trying to be preachy one way or another, and it didn't. I really, uh, I can't remember the name of the young woman. She's in the new movie Companion.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's immensely talented, and Heretic was one. I was very impressed by it.
I haven't got to watch it yet. Like it was on my list of catch up, and I just did not get to it in time. But
I,
I
you,
I do want to watch
I,
it so bad.
I predict you will really like it.
Yeah, I looking at looking at your comment comment. Like I really like I can see us doing an episode on the idea of elevated horror. It's one of those terms that I kind of hate. To get off topic very briefly, because like, I feel like horror since the beginning, like elevated horror, smart horror, elevated horror is like, I mean, Night of the Living Dead is an elevated horror film that's from 1968. Like, what do we do? But no, I get it. That would be just an idea I had. So speaking into existence, but I do want to see it really badly. I've heard it's really good. Uh,
Oh man, it is.
so before we get into my number six, I just want to remind everybody here, all of you who are here watching, uh, hey, we're all friends here, and this is a safe space because my number six is Oz Perkins' Long Legs. um, I listening to Dick talk about. I was like, yeah, okay, I totally am with you, but I don't know what it was. Sitting in the theater through this movie, whatever magic spell I was under, I can promise you I was sober when I watched it, so I don't like there was nothing like inherently like tripping me out to this movie. I This was just a weird movie that caught me in all the right places. I love the 90ness of it. I love the slow build. I love Nicolas Cage as this like insane, like, I don't know what we're doing, but I was here for it. Um, I think the movie um, takes turn. Like I was not expecting the switch from serial killer to Satan movie, but when it happens, I was totally along for the ride. Spoilers for Long Legs. Uh, and I find like the movie also has a lot of humor. that you weren't expecting in it. Not a lot, but there's just quick moments of humor. The one for me that like is really funny, even though it's so sadistic and twisted, is the scene where the her partner's possessed, and like he's like, "Come with me to the kitchen, we'll cut the cake," and she goes, "Oh, we'll be right back," and he goes, "No, I'll be back." Like I don't know. Like I said, I listening to you how much you didn't like it. I was like, I understand all of that, but that particular day at that particular moment, long legs just hit me and in the right nerve and has stuck with me since. Like it's every once in a while there's a moment of that movie that'll flash in my head where I'm just like, oh fuck, I need to rewatch that movie again. Um, so it's just a weird thing, but I fucking love long legs.
It, did you like it as a serious movie?
I did. I did like that it was kind of a we're not quite doing a Fincher movie. Um, I do like. I think the opening of it really gets me. I think you're right about Mikey Monroe. I think that um the idea of us making her like we're trying to not say she's autistic, but also she's playing it very much like a Sheldon Cooper type autistic. Like I that could have been a lot better. But like I said, there are some humorous parts in the movie, but there are parts where the part where I'm waiting for the conventional jump scare, like the part where she's sitting at her desk and you can see behind her the kitchen that's lit up, and then just a little beyond the kitchen is that dark open door with no lights on in that dark room. And I'm sitting in the theater and I'm waiting and like, oh fuck, here comes that jump scare, here it comes, and it never it builds that tension. That's that to me. That's the one thing this movie does, and most Oz Perkins movies do. Whether you like his horror or not, is he can really build tension, even when it doesn't always work. He can build tension, and just the imagery. Some of the imagery in this movie has stuck with me. The scene of the weird, when they walk into the barn that's empty, but there's like a cross nailed to the floor, and you're like, that's fucking weird. It reminded me a lot of the cop part of the movie reminded me a lot of Stephen King's The Outsider, which had a great adaptation on HBO. I recommend that show. But just kind of for me, this movie captured a little more of like the kind of the weird tone that that book has more than the TV show does, because the TV show does lean into the supernatural, but as much more cop procedural HBO TV show. Whereas this kind of when it takes that turn to supernatural, it jumps in with both feet. And this felt like this could have like if you told me this was an adaptation of a Stephen King novel, I would have believed you. And so for me on that level, it does work really well as a movie.
I think it's totally all over the place. I think the switch to and the switch of the movie is not well handled and wildly unnecessary. It just the movie just kept on deflating for me rapidly. Glad you liked it. A lot of people did. I hated it.
I feel like
But
every
that's the way we
year
do this.
I feel like every this happens to you and I every year. So last year it was Talk to Me, and the year before that it was Barbarian. So I'm curious
Yep.
what will be 2025's Long Legs.
There'll be one. There'll be some sort of weird horror movie you will love. Another one. It's like that was Us that you
Mm-hmm.
really liked and I hated. And it's funny because it keeps on ending up where we both feel very strongly about it. Um, I can't lie though. Out of all of those movies I just mentioned, this is the one I get the least in terms of the appeal you find, especially since Nicolas Cage and pancake makeup is just awful. I'm sorry, but I'm curious. You mentioned I'm curious to see what's going to end up being that movie this one because I can almost guarantee you it will happen again. Keeps things interesting. I love it.
I will recommend to you if you want to see Oz Perkins kind of make a slower movie like Long Legs, but do it as a dark comedy. Watch The Monkey. I think you would enjoy it.
Well, I was watching the trailer. It's like, oh, from the creator of Longlegs. It's like, wow, great. Thank you for letting me know up front, so I can know to avoid it. I
No,
might
no,
watch it just because
you should
I'll
watch
have to.
it.
Yeah, the most controversial movie on my list. And it's funny because the controversy kind of went all over the place because people didn't know what to expect. Uh, Releasing a movie called Civil War in an election year is, of course, going to be, kind of a loaded gun, so to speak. I know people thought it was going to lean one way, and it turned out it came out and it didn't take a political stance, which I'll be honest, I think greatly enhanced the movie. Uh, Alex Garland's Civil War, he ends up making a harrowing tale of a fractured America in which things have gone horribly wrong. The country's divided. We're in the throes of war, and to follow this group of journalists across the land as the Western Alliance, the alliance of states fighting against the president, the United States is split up into a few factions. The main one is the East Coast, that is part of the original United States, versus the Western Alliance, which is an alliance, I think it was 19 other states, mostly in the West, including Texas and California. And the Western Alliance is doing a push to take D.C. So you get to go on this road trip with these journalists as they're kind of traveling through war torn America and all the things they see and the sheer horrors of war they witness. And you get to see people that are trying to carry on like everything's normal. It got me, it's like the realism of that. That there would be people trying to carry on like it was okay. It's just like we just want to stay out of it. Where other people resorting to brutal vigilante justice, the economy's in shambles. It just it it's terrifying. It's terrifying to think that that could happen and just how bad it could get. Um, Scenes of combat are, in my opinion, incredible. I went to see this in the theater in IMAX, and I had mixed feelings because, on one hand, it was very impressive. On the other hand, being a combat vet, it got to me on a very real, visceral level, and really, I was amped up for long afterwards because of what I saw, the sights, the sounds, the everything they pulled off so expertly well. Especially the final battle in DC is, man, what a great scene of combat. I was impressed, and no, it's not a political movie. It's about the horrors of war and how bad a civil war would be in this country, and journalism and the roles it plays in our society and the importance of journalism. A lot of people miss that point. A lot of people were mad, like, why didn't it take a political stand? It didn't need to, and I think it's more effective for not taking a political stand.
I will save my piece for Civil War here in a little bit. So my number five is Nick already touched on, and it's Nosferatu. Um, Robert Eggers and is one of a few directors that are on this list that they're on my list of just tell me when their next movie comes out. Like I don't have to see a trailer. I don't need a title. Like you just say Robert Eggers has a new movie coming out. It comes out this day. Great, I'll be there. Um, with that, I think you should go back and watch The Witch and The Northman and The Lighthouse. Um, I think Robert Eggers, he's 4 for 4 and just outstanding filmmaking. Like the attention to detail, the way that he makes these movies so like painstakingly time period accurate for no other reason than just because he wants to. Um, is great. Yeah, like you said, Skarsgård. I love the fact that it's not just him doing a variant on Pennywise. Like if you didn't know it was Skarsgård, you wouldn't know it was Skarsgård.
No,
I'm
no way.
fine that he has the mustache. Go people who get mad, who got mad, go read the novel. He has a mustache. Um, I love, you know, I think for me still the I love that we finally got another great Dracula adaptation because I feel like it's been since the Francis Ford. Speaking of Francis Ford Coppola, his Dracula, like I love that Dracula, and that's still probably my favorite Dracula. But I did love this. I will say this on my one thing is I liked Lily Rose Depp. I think of all the actors in it, I feel like she is giving more to do than anybody else in this movie. Like she has to do a lot. And
He does.
I think for the most part she gets it, especially considering my only interaction with Lily Rose Depp was when we went to the theater because I paid Fathom event prices to see Yoga Hosers. Like, so that
I
was a
remember that
real
one
low
too.
bar. That was a real low bar. I thought she was great at this. Yeah, I love just and I like Herzog's Nosferatu, but just the little or changes he makes were like like you said, he's not sexy, he's a rotting corpse, and like the idea of like the hearts in the chest, why would he not like bite him on the chest? Like that stuff is great. Um I feel like it might have been a little too long, just in the parts in the castle, like where before he gets out. But I loved it. Like I remember what this was honestly coming fresh out of the theater. It was easily my number one, and then just kind of as I went through the list, going back through certain movies, it just kind of pushed back a little bit. But top five, man, I thought this movie was utterly fantastic.
Um, Also, be remiss to not mention Willem Dafoe.
Mm-hmm.
Does a wonderful job in this movie,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Lily Rose Depp. It's not that she's bad at this movie. I just, I think, and she's given a tremendous amount to do and a lot to pull off. I just don't think she was quite ready for prime time,
Yeah.
but I think she's got a lot of upside in the future.
Yeah.
And she wasn't. It wasn't. There was not enough lacking in her performance for it to take me out of the movie.
Yeah.
Um, and some people think she did wonderfully, and I get that. It's just my personal thing, but overall, fantastic. I mean, such a gothic horror movie,
Yeah.
and it works. Well, you mentioned this one before. There's never been a bad Mad Max movie. We are now 5 for 5. Furiosa and Mad Max Saga is, I think, a great prequel. Wonderful prequel. Yeah, it should have come out years ago. It really should have, because I think the original Fury, Fury Road came out in 2015. I think we should have gotten this movie by 2018, 2019. So it lost a lot of its momentum. But man, when we finally got it, we got an epic movie about these warring tribes, and they absolutely ruined and desolate Earth. And it looks and sounds amazing. Yeah, there was some CGI in it more than there should have been. But we still got some amazing action set pieces, especially the scene where Praetorian Jack, a character who I thought was an awesome addition to the universe, uh, is on their way to do a delivery when they're attacked by a bunch of marauders. It was such a classic Mad Max. I'm on the road and we are fighting it out while on the move on wheels. Uh, some cool visuals, cool weapons. This one, I think, does better world building than literally any of the other Mad Max movies and the things it refers to. Because you have the man who's like
Mm-hmm.
keeps track of the history. Um, and he has written all over his body, and he mentions certain things about the history, like the Boomtown Wars and such, that had me running to my phone to look up like some of the other history behind this timeline as to what happened, and it helped me better understand where Furiosa and Matt and Fury Road fit into the grand scheme of things. Uh, Chris Chris Hemsworth as Dementus was a lot of fun, a really over the top villain, but all the villains in this series are really over the top. They need to be. Uh, the visuals with like Gastown and the Citadel and the Green Place, I thought were just great. Anya Taylor Joy, I think she's good at everything. She did a great job here as the younger Furiosa, and overall, it gave me what I was wanting in a movie like this, and I would say it even exceeded my expectations. It's not it's not quite as good as Fury Road, but it's right up there, and man, it's enjoyable. Such a fun balls to the wall action movie.
And the fact that Chris Hemsworth can be very incredibly threatening in that movie while sounding like Nigel from the Wild Thornberries is pretty amazing.
Yeah, with this prosthetic nose and all that, and it it works. Whole movie works. But yeah, Praetorian Jack, really liked him.
So my number 4 is a movie that the filmmaker, this is her I should their follow up, and I really dug their first movie, even though it was really kind of weird and wasn't what I was expecting, and a very artsy kind of elevated horror movie. And so for this one, I was blown away by how much this movie affected me and like how much it has stayed with me since then. And it's I Saw the TV Glow. Like I don't know if it is because obviously I'm not part of that particular community. Uh, so like the certain things that are being said for that particular group of people doesn't hit me that way. But what did hit me so much this movie was just kind of number one the idea of because this is what maybe it's because like of this like it's two people who become friends uh because of like their love of this TV show. Fun fact: Nick and I became friends at a summer camp when I was 8.5 years old because we both started talking about Batman Forever. Like, like that happens, and like here we are today. And so watching that movie, and just kind of I love the aesthetic of the show where it's like this cross between like every like live action Nickelodeon show we grew up watching in the '90s mixed with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Um, and like it looks like scenes straight out of Are You Afraid of the Dark? This idea of friendship and growing up, and then you get to the idea of um, growing growing up and possibly growing out of opportunities. As some we're gonna, Nick now and me very soon is gonna be 40 years old, and you start thinking about things like that, and you growing, what if second chances were this, what would I have done different? And um, the idea, like the way the nostalgia works for people our age nowadays, and uh, how we've made nostalgia such a part of our lives, and kind of our personality. It's just like I said, for a movie that really kind of was made and the director they have said as much that it was made about their journey through transitioning and becoming who they are as a person. And for me, like it's not that, but still like this movie affected me very emotionally, and like it really shocked me by how much it did. And I just loved it. Like I think it's a beautiful piece of like emotional film telling of somebody like laying out all their feelings of life on on the table, and like you consume it and get something different out of it, but depending on the person watching it. I really loved it.
This is one I'm really disappointed I haven't watched yet. I was immediately intrigued with after I watched the trailer. I'm going to prioritize watching this one soon. It really, really looks up my alley, and I'm glad to hear it is that good.
Also, you get a surprise Fred, like off camera Fred Durst. Like you don't know Fred Durst in the movie, so you read the credits, and you're like Fred Durst.
What? Um, my number four is one you already talked about, and I will expand upon it further. The Substance, starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. Uh, I cannot believe this movie got the budget and the actors and talent it did in it and got a wide release. This is a insane body horror movie. It is such a gross out crazy mess. Well, I mean mess in the best way. It's just the blood, the gore, the general grossness when like Demi Moore's just eating whole rotisserie chickens and whatnot. Seeing, the needles pierce into the spine and just the it's so gnarly at every turn, and it's unflinching in how gnarly it is. It and that climax is so wild. It it gets very over the top, but I was there for it. I enjoyed it. It's this movie. It impressed me. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting at all what what we got. And it just you had told me a few years ago that Demi Moore would be in a body horror movie that was nominated for an Oscar. Be like, yeah, get the hell out of here. But it's great. It's intriguing, and it's held together by two very talented actresses. Dennis Quaid, man, he plays a good creep. He has a small role in this, but man, he nails it. Uh, I was impressed, and I'm astounded this movie's getting nominated for these awards just due to the type of movie it is. Because this is, I mean, it is a gross out body horror movie, and I keep on emphasizing that because I'm still kind of disbelief of we got this movie, and not only that, it was so unflinching in its execution, but still very well made.
Fact that as goopy and gross as this movie is, the fact that it has gotten the backing and the notoriety and the praise it's gotten, like you said, is just insane.
It
Insane.
is it biggest surprise of the year, and the recognition to get it. Well, in the chat, Tommy was pointing out that um, movies of this type, science fiction and horror and whatnot, typically don't get much attention when it comes to awards time. And the fact that they could recognize that this one was very well made and very well executed and extremely well acted, it's encouraging that maybe we'll get some more of these type of movies in the future that really swing for the fences.
Especially since I'm still mad that Tony Collette didn't get nominated for Hereditary. Like, talk about
Yeah.
snub. All right, so my number three is one that Nick has already talked about. It's Maxine. As much as we talked about how the Sony movies and that like dumpster fire of an idea should be studied, on the opposite spectrum, this trilogy should be studied in like how to do a modern franchise. Because the fact that this is a trilogy that came out of nowhere, and are three very distinct movies is nuts. Um, like you, I think Pearl is the best movie of the
Yes.
trilogy. However, I think Maxine is my favorite because I love X and what it is, but to me, Maxine captures uh two thing. It pays homage to two things that I just absolutely love, and it does it pitch perfectly. And one is like Insane Giallos and 1980s Brian De Palma. I love sleazy Brian De Palma, like Body Double and Dress to Kill. Like this is totally like his this is Ty West's Body Double, and I'm totally here for it. Mia Goth is the queen of horror, as and rightfully so. Um, and in fact, I'm kind of glad that that Blade movie keeps getting stopped. Not because it shouldn't happen, because it really kind of shouldn't. Even though I like Marshall Ali, but I want Mia Goth to stay right where she is and the queen of these like into these crazy weird horror movies. Um, like you said, Kevin Bacon in this movie is he's so fucking gross. Um, the scene, where we're running around the Warner Brothers back lot and we're hiding in the Psycho House, I love it. Um, the music, the needle drops in this movie are fantastic for some great '80s music. And I love the ending. Completely like most '80s Brian De Palma movies, goes completely off the rails. Like you could almost like you can get a contact high from what should be the cocaine that fueled this movie if it had been made in the '80s. Like it's just so much fun, and it goes for it. I was just blown away by how much this sticks the landing of a trilogy, but as a whole, like what a wild ride that Ty West just kind of brought forth from nothing to give us three incredible horror movies. And like I said, Pearl is the best made and the best acted, but God, I love this movie so much.
It's it's really great, and that's the thing. On any given day, it would probably be higher on my list than it is. It's such a great combination. And you pointing out it's like a De Palma movie. I cannot. I'll be honest, that didn't occur to me, but that is very accurate. Almost does better De Palma than Brian De Palma himself. I won't go on about it, but I, I I love Maxine. I love this trilogy. Bravo, Ty West, for pulling this off so well. It's impressive. My number three is going in a much different and softer direction. Uh, I love animated movies. I love kids' movies. It, they speak to me and make me think of a simpler time in my life. And this year we got such a beautiful animated movie in The Wild Robot. The Wild Robot is about a robot who's their transport plane they're in crashes, and this robot winds up on an island and integrating itself in with a bunch of the wild animals on this island and adopting a baby gosling. Uh, this movie is sweet. It's funny. It's visually stunning. It has so much heart. It's got um, it'll I'm trying to find the right word here. It'll make you like on the edge of your seat as to what's going to happen next and the fates are going to be, and there's just moments that make your heart absolutely soar. It's it's a it's it's a beautiful movie, but it's also entertaining as hell, and just I loved it. I knew when I was sitting in the theater watching it, I was seeing something special. It's a modern day animated movie classic.
I haven't seen it, but literally the last couple of hours, I was watching something and it showed a trailer for it, and I was like, God, I need to watch that movie. Um,
You abs Anybody can enjoy it. Absolutely anybody. And I just it impressed me so much.
so if Maxine to me does a beautiful pitch perfect job of paying homage to giallo and like '80s grimy LA thrillers, my number two does the exact same thing for kind of a lost genre. Um, and that's the genre of the sexy, sweaty thriller. My number two is Love Lies Bleeding. Um, like I've learned to look past the Twilight movies for Kristen Stewart. She's a phenomenal actress when she wants to be. Um, this movie I put in the same like I put it on like it's the best this genre has to offer. Like I put it up there with movies like Blood Simple or Body Heat. Like I just thought this movie was super fun, super sexy crime thriller noir. With a little bit of artsy fartsy in it because there are some scenes that are kind of depicting um, kind of like visualizing a like a roid rage or being freed from the shackles of whatever. There are some scenes in this movie where you're like, wait, what is happening? That are totally there as like just visual cues for emotions. It also has some pitch black humor in it, but uh, Kristen Stewart and the other actor
Katie
Lily,
O'Brien.
yes, the actress who plays the bodybuilder, who I had not
Yeah,
seen in
Katie
anything,
O'Brien.
and I see her in a ton of stuff, and she is fantastic in this movie. And Ed Helm, God, you forget how
Ed
great
Harris.
Ed Harris. I'm sorry, Ed Helm. What a wildly different movie. that that's a wildly different film. That's one of those things like to say Ed Helm. I'm just like that's one of those things where people are like make a movie where one actor stays the same but everybody else is Muppets. It's like replace one actor in a movie with another actor and get the same reaction as a Muppet. It's putting Ed Helm in Love Lies Bleeding. Ed Harris in this movie is so sleazy and scary. Dave Franco is great. The actress, Jenna Malone, she is so good. This is just a if you like just a sweaty, grimy, like kind of like grossly sexy, like thriller noir. I think you'll have a lot of fun with Love Lies Bleeding.
Well, ironic you should say that because I was waiting for this to show up in your list because my number two is also Love Lies Bleeding.
Ha! We
Um, I
got
w-
one.
I went back and forth of placing this as my number one. I saw it when we did an episode about the movies we're looking forward to in 2024. I mentioned Love Lies Bleeding. Uh, I thought the trailer was great, especially the way the music was integrated. The song "Small Town Boy," excellent trailer. But this movie is a neo noir masterpiece. A small town with corruption and crime going on underneath the surface and a lot of secrets. Kristen Stewart, excellent. Katie M. O'Brien, this is like a defining breakout role for her. Ed Harris and his creepy ass skullet, fantastic. And I'd be remiss to not mention Dave
Mm-hmm.
Franco, who's in it, who just plays an absolute bastard. Uh, some people I know didn't like the kind of creative directions it takes where things get real weird at times. I loved it. I thought it enhanced the experience overall. I got what it was trying to do, and it did it masterfully. Great music, beautifully shot, well written, great acting. Uh, this is going to be a favorite of mine for a long time to come. I think it is an absolutely stellar movie. And it's just, yeah, the sweaty thriller. That's a great way to describe this movie because it is. And it nails it. And on a side note, I have an interest in bodybuilding, and they do an. I like how they integrate that into the plot and her wanting to train and plan for this and whatnot. And the sometimes not great realities of that sport. Uh, there's also one scene in particular which is extremely brutal, but man, it was well done. And it involves a bodybuilder um, fighting a guy, and it is something. There's a lot of wild scenes in this movie, and I some might not care for the ending. I thought the ending was what it needed to be, beginning to end, masterpiece.
My only and that's not a complaint on the movie. My only complaint is I was watching it and I was just soaking it in, fucking loving this movie. Amber is sitting next to me, but she's on her phone. She's watching something. She only finishes what she's doing and takes off her headphones and looks up right at the ending. And so she's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "No, no, no, no! This is one of the best movies of the year. Please, please, please! You have to watch this movie." All right, so here we come. My number one, again, like I mentioned with Robert Eggers, and I kind of feel at this point in time you can put Ty West on that list of just guys who are just like they got a movie coming out. Cool. What day? And I'll be there. Um, and this was my number one when I walked out of the theater. And like I said, only briefly did I think it was going to be surpassed. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought about it, there was no way this wasn't going to be my number one. It's Civil War. Um, I love Alex Garland, and seeing the trailer for this, I was like, this movie is gonna, whether he leans into what they're expecting. I think a lot of people are gonna be mad if he does. Or people are gonna be mad if he doesn't. I was a little, I won't say worried, but so his last movie, Men, which really does lean in heavy into the what we're trying to get across, which I did like, but I remember Amber not liking it at all. Um, which you understand if you've seen Men. So I was a little worried it might be a little heavy-handed like Men. I love that it's not. I like you said, the fact that he doesn't take a political side because again, it's not a political movie. It's not about you don't it the what the Western Alliance or what uh Ron Swanson as the president did. That doesn't mean shit. That's a human story about how humans would deal with the modern day civil war. Well, also, honestly, was a kind of a beautiful love letter to people who don't get talked about a lot, I feel, and that's war journalists. Like, when you are in the thick of that stuff and your only kind of weapon is your camera. And like I said, I understand how I don't understand, but I do understand how it would have affected you, and that is um, but even sitting there, like just the scenes of the scenes with the guys, the snipers at the house, where when they're just asking like, "Hey,
Right.
what did they do?" and he's like, "I don't know." Then why are you here? I don't know. Like it's just everything is broken down immediately, and it's just a shit show, and you're kind of taken along on this journey of seeing what in reality would happen, and that's the scariest part. The scene with Jesse Plemons is
Yes.
probably the scariest thing you will see on film for a while. And all he does is talk. He's just talking. He just asks questions. But that whole setup for that is utterly mortifying. But and then you get to that ending, the ending, the siege on the White House, and then getting into the White House to get to Nick Offerman's character, and the ending of that movie just is a punch in the gut. Um, but with all of that, but also so much beauty in this movie, and the way he films these characters, and the moments where they do get to have kind of, I don't want to say like a calm before the storm, because the storm is always there. Like there's always tension in this movie, but just that one moment to breathe, knowing that that's it. That's all you're gonna get, and then it's just like I said, a beautiful human story that has its message. Never once does it beat you in the face with it, um, but also can get to you on a very emotional level. And like you said, the way he films the war stuff, like I was just thinking he has that movie coming out this year that looks like a hard watch for anybody. That he
Yeah.
directed with the combat vet, which just looks like, as much as I love Alex Garland, and I'll be there anytime. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like,
Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to give that one a watch or not, but
yeah. But
I'm
this
glad
is
I
the
watched it.
it does exactly what the best stories do. Um, whether it be film or literature, it takes, when you think about whether horror or sci-fi or whatever, it takes these great grand scenarios, and but at the heart of them has to be this human story. Um, and to me, it feels like, as a movie kind of taps into a way of being telling political stories without telling political stories that has been lost for a long time because it honestly kind of feels like very Rod Serling to me. Like
It does.
this could have been a Twilight Zone type thing, and I'm here for that. I fucking loved this. Like I was just enthralled with it. I took Ashton with me to watch it, and like I don't know how he really felt about it, but I was just like watching it, and I was like, that's it. Like that is going to be the best movie I see all year, and I don't know that anything could top it. Some came close, but at the end of the day, I was like, nothing moved me quite like Civil War did, and exceeded every expectation I could have had for it.
It is a powerful movie, and I got neither one of us to mention it. Kirsten Dunst was
Mm-hmm.
one of the main characters, and I think she does an absolutely wonderful job. And the world building, the way it's able to build so convincingly build this ruined America is fantastic. Even with just some references to certain things that have happened, and seeing the stopping at the gas station, and there's a guy strung up in the car wash. All the details in this movie really make it work. I loved it. I think it's awesome, and it's one of those. There's several on my list that could easily switch around and be higher, and this is one of them. I highly recommend it to people. I know a lot of people are avoiding it for various reasons, but yeah, it's an important movie and one to watch. Well, you probably won't be terribly surprised by my number one. It's Reagan. No, I'm kidding. It's not Reagan. Uh, my number one is a movie that almost killed me to watch it. I was on my way opening night to see it and get my popcorn bucket when a truck driver nearly killed me last year on February 29th. Dune Part 2. A few years ago, the Dune remake, Dune Part 1, blew me away. I'm a longtime fan of the 1984 David Lynch Dune, despite its many, many issues. But Dune Part 1 was just, it was a classic. It was a sci fi on a grand scale that told a hell of a story and showed this amazing universe. Then Dune Part 2 came out, and I think upped the ante even more. Following the further adventures of Paul Atreides, soon to be Paul Muad'Dib, as he joins the Fremen, these people in the desert, to combat the Harkonnens and the rest of the soldiers backed up by the Emperor. Visually stunning, acting fantastic. I think Timothy Chalamet is a was an excellent choice to play Paul Atreides. Uh, Florence Pugh, I think, does a really good job as the princess. No, Paul Muad'Dib. Anyway, um, there's such a sorry, my thought I got derailed there. Anyway, sorry, it's been a long day. Um, One of the scenes that stands out is there's an attack. They do an attack on a spice harvester when they're fighting their insurgency, and that is such an incredible scene. So well done and so tense. In a movie with a lot of fantastic scenes, that one stands out. And I really like the Dune 1984. Really presses like Paul is a he's a good guy, and he's there for to liberate people and be this wonderful leader. That's not how the things go in the Dune series. It's not realistic. And you get to see Paul as he rises to be this messianic figure that he knows there are horrifying things happening in the future. Uh, it doesn't have a cheesy happy ending, and it has a very grounded kind of somber ending, which it needs to. I love the design of the worms. I love Arrakis. I love the scenes on Gidi Prime with the Harkonnens. Austin Butler as Fade Rata, fantastic. Overall, it is a sci-fi classic. It is wonderful. Dunes Part 1 and Part 2 are some of my favorite sci fi movies ever. I look forward to the next Dune movie, although I'm not sure people are going to be ready for just how brutal and grim it's going to be. Uh, Things don't get happier from here, folks, but that's okay. I think it'll make, as long as Denis Villeneuve is at the helm, it will continue to be an excellent film series.
Give me that giant worm emperor.
We can dream.
Only for another reason to get another popcorn bucket. So yeah, that guys, that's our best and worst. Real quick, I'll see anybody guys that are still here. Does anybody have anything else that was on their list for the best of the year? I'll give you guys a minute.
Wait, ooh man, this episode was ran long, but we had a lot of movies to talk
Yeah.
about.
What did you think about Christopher Walken as the Emperor, though?
He had kind of a more minor role. I'll be honest, I liked it. It wasn't crazy over the top Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
It was a more reserved Christopher Walken. I think it actually worked. He is not wouldn't have been my first pick, but it's like the look he gives. He's like the way he just stares through people. I think it's very effective. Uh, Unconventional casting, but one that actually I think turned out quite well.
I do enjoy kind of. I haven't read all the Doom books, but knowing enough to know that there have been some articles where people are like, "Oh, they're saying Jason Momoa is going to come back for the third Dune movie," and I was like, "You goddamn right he is."
Yeah,
Just
he
wait.
he if they follow the books, yes, he will be back. And you're wondering how is that possible? There's a lot going on in the Dune universe that can allow such things, and I hope they further expand on some of the lore and technology in Dune. And I need to watch Dune Prophecy. I hear it's great. I'll be interested to see if they expand out this universe even more. It is a deep well to draw from, and there's a lot of interesting things they can go to, especially if they get into the Great Machine War and the Butlerian Jihad, and yeah, it could get wild.
Yeah.
But even if we just get the Dune trilogy and that's it, I'll be happy with it. I Dune is not an easy book to do. It's not an easy movie to remake. David Lynch famously failed at it the first time. Said I love it, but man, it is a giant mess of a movie. But the way he made these two movies so clean and built the world in them so well, it man, that guy's got talent. He's one of the best modern filmmakers.
So with that, let's do a little segue because we all want to get out of here. We're almost to the part to where they finally start like doing the musical numbers in the actual Oscars, so we don't want to go as long as that. But speaking of David Lynch, yes, tragically, we lost David Lynch, and so I mentioned it at the top, but I'll mention it again. For our March live here at the end of the month, we are going to do a David Lynch tribute. Much like we did with Roger Corman when he unfortunately passed last year. Where we're just gonna kind of maybe hit on some of the basics of most movies, and we're gonna deep dive into a few and do some really deep analysis of them. So I won't give away what we're gonna talk about just yet, but needless to say, get caught up on your Lynch as best as you can. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun because a lot of people interpret Lynch a different way, and so it's not really something that I think I've seen a lot of Lynch with you, um, but I don't think we've ever really sat down and like really discussed David Lynch.
We
Uh,
have not.
so it's gonna be a lot of fun. You are not gonna miss that. So that is at the end of the month. However, every week we have new reviews going up over at our YouTube channel. So if you are here and you subscribe here, because you should, that way you know when we're live. Now you can also do that over at our YouTube channel. Those go up every Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. This week is going to actually be this replay, so if you came in late or you had to leave early, Never fear, I'm not gonna make you wait a couple months until I go. Oh, I gotta put that on YouTube. I'm gonna put this on YouTube tomorrow. I'm gonna download it and then upload it to YouTube tomorrow. After you gotta slap all the cool intros and extras and descriptions and stuff on it. So this replay will be up for consumption on our YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. And then, of course, we'll be into March and movies that are coming out soon. Plus, I don't think anything came out this weekend, so it works out in our favor, or at least nothing that came out around here. Uh, so stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for next month. Like I said, get your Lynch in. Um, it's gonna be a lot of fun to talk about, and you're gonna be lost anyway. So you want to be less lost by having seen some of the movies we're gonna talk about. At least have a picture in your head about what may be going on. But I think that's gonna do it for us. Unless you have any final thoughts.
Oh, I just wanted to extend a thanks to my friends here in Spokane who have shown up to support me, and they've been in the chat. Um, Tommy, oldest friend in Spokane, Travis, my good bud, who I went to school with, and we get to work together. And Logan, a great guy who we work together in the same department, and we become pretty close. I appreciate the support and all guys showing up and listening. It absolutely means the world to us to have you there, and we love your input. And from the bottom of my heart, I deeply appreciate you being willing to come here and listen to a couple of middle-aged guys talk about movies. And of course, Jason, my oldest friend, love that we get to have another year of talking about the best and worst, things we agreed with, things we disagreed with, and of course, we had some that lined right up because we always do. Great
Yep.
minds think alike most of the time. Well, pal, I hope you have a good time, and we will collaborate again
Yep.
very soon.
We will see you guys next time. Bye.